Bright morning star arising, bright morning stars arising, bright morning stars arising. Day is a breaking in my soul. Oh, where are my dear mothers? Oh, where are my dear fathers? They are sowing seeds of gladness. Day is a breaking in my soul. Our opening reading this morning comes from our principles and from number 2, our second principle, which is we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, with a special emphasis today on compassion in human relations. Because truthfully, the last year and change, I guess it's almost 17 months now. March was when it really started. Pandemic started to take off in our community. It has been really hard. It's been a time that's filled with loss and risk and threat and conflict and change and more. And we've been forced, if you will, to adapt to a new way of living, one more isolated from friends and family and work and school and church and more. One filled with more danger and risk from a disease that kills 1 in 100 people. And for those who survive, can have long-term health effects. We may have lost our job or our income and our savings. Many of us were impacted financially. We may have been afraid for our children, how this disease would affect them. We may have had to switch our lives around to make education from home possible. Conflict was common. The mask mandate, what to do with our schools, vaccinations, not to mention the challenges of racism in the last year and the extremely intense political situation, which peaked with the January 6th insurrection. We may have lost loved ones in the last year and change and time to COVID, or just to life. May have been unable to be with our loved ones during their last moments of life. May not have been able to gather to remember them the way we would have liked to. Some of us are professional caretakers and may have been on the front lines of the disease as healthcare workers or first responders or teachers or social workers. In my personal case, as someone working every day with the very high risk group of people without homes. And these times called us not just to work more and longer and harder, but to also put ourselves and those we live with at much greater risk because of that being on the front lines. And in my particular work, I'll have to say that this last year was absolutely the hardest year of work that I've had in my over more than a decade doing the work that I've been doing. I think working with people without homes is hard enough, but adding a life-threatening disease on top of it just makes everything and made everything harder. And, during that year, we had to entirely revamp, just as an example of what, that entire year, we had to completely revamp our services and how we do them. We had to open a new shelter for people who could isolate, so that they could isolate if they were exposed to the disease or had gotten the disease. We had to move another shelter from another location so people could socially distance. We had to deal with a city that was intent on evicting people from the local parks, despite CDC guidelines saying not to break up encampments. And we had to start a whole new winter shelter just to help deal with the aftermath of that park eviction, as well as the really heightened number of people experiencing street homelessness due to the pandemic in the past year. And those were just a few things. Our volunteer base dropped by 90% for obvious reasons. And our staff in this time, we were fortunate enough to double, which made all those programs possible, but also added a lot of extra need and attention and demand on trying to manage going from 30 staff members to peaking at 65, and just dealing with that change. So it's been a lot over the last year, and for all of us. And it's been a hard 17 months. And of course, painfully, I think it's hard to even talk about, but that it's obviously not over yet. But as things have slowed down a bit these last months, as they have, and giving us a breath, perhaps, hopefully with the Delta variant not kind of reemerging and bringing us back into the scenario as bad as it was last winter, but recognizing that's there. But we have had a little bit of time to breathe here. And I know in that time of breath that I personally have been able to slow down myself. As things slowed down, so did I. And as I've done that, as I've slowed down, I've had the opportunity to self-reflect some on the last 16 months or 17 months in a way that honestly all the urgency of the last year hasn't let me do. And in that self-reflection, just find the space to acknowledge, wow, that hurt. And I think so caught up in the busyness in the year, I noticed for me that many of the harms and hurts that I put off over the last year just started to surface. That in the space of the quietness, all that I had ignored started to show itself and come out. And I think this pandemic has been many things. It's done many things, and it's been many things. But I think it's important to recognize one very, very important thing that this pandemic has been, which is that it has been a traumatic event. I believe most of us, if not all of us in the US at least, I'm not as equipped to speak about elsewhere, but I imagine there's overlap. But I would say that we have experienced a collective trauma over the last year, something that it wasn't just a physical threat, but there was actually, I think, for many of us, a collective trauma that we've experienced together. And that means that many of us likely will have or are having after effects of that trauma. And that we may in fact have symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, that we may actually be experiencing the after effects of that trauma and having significant symptoms even of post-traumatic stress disorder. And I've certainly noticed that in myself. Among those symptoms that I've experienced, I've been quicker to frustration and anger, and which I think actually has come a bit from kind of an unconscious protecting of a wound from the past year. And I've also noticed that I've been actually much harder on myself, more judgmental, and more critical of myself, and personally in need of more self-gentleness and care, which I've struggled to give myself. And perhaps worst of all, I've noticed that I've at times been much more anxious, often living with a phantom feeling that something bad is about to happen, even when things are perfectly calm and all right. And I've actually had to train myself to release that fear and let myself relax. It's often in my past experience, having that fear of something going is about to go wrong was actually a reliable indicator that something might be about to go wrong. And what I'm noticing now is I'm just having those feelings, just they're just happening. And it's been an act of self-awareness to if you will, not trust that feeling and just realize that it is just a response of so many crises happening so often, and that I can just let myself relax and rest and not realize or not take that feeling seriously in the way I would have in the past. And I can imagine that some of you are noticing some of these experiences in yourself too, that these things are also going on for you. Having gone through such a difficult experience together, I want to say loudly and clearly to each of you that it's pretty normal right now to be a bit sore. And you may find yourself in need of more self-gentleness and care. And I encourage you to give that to yourselves. But I also think it's also a reminder that because this has been a collective trauma, this is something we're going through together, that the person next to you or around you or the people that you come into contact with may also be in need of more gentleness and care. And it may come up and reveal itself in symptoms similar to ours that we may be having, which may include they may be grumpier or angrier or more afraid or more uncomfortable or even maybe a little meaner. And so these times, I think, are an invitation to take it a bit easier on each other and ourselves as best we can. If anything, I think we need time to heal. One way I think we can do this is to be extra intentional about self-care. And I don't know about you, but but my default self-care routine is often to fall asleep in front of the television. That it's relaxing, it's restful, and it's often fun. Whatever's on the TV, and then just conking out after that. But I've also noticed something that, and I don't want to totally disparage it because it does help and it does work at times. But I've also noticed something that just the act of doing that, just the act of rest, just the act of watching television is not enough recovery for me. That it doesn't refill my cup. It gives me a chance to rest and relax, which is good, but it doesn't actually restore. And perhaps paradoxically and frustratingly, it does seem that at least some acts of self-care take a bit of actual work. And I'll share something with you that feels a little vulnerable. So I came down with COVID. Actually, a number of my staff members did. About 15 of our staff actually got the disease through our work, and I got it back in February. And I was fine. I'm fully recovered and such, but it was like a bad case of pneumonia for me. It took me about a month to fully get back to normal. But starting back in February with COVID, I started sleeping on my couch in front of the TV every night. That was just kind of what I was doing. And at first it really felt, it was just comfortable. It felt like a comfort thing. It was really easy. And I have a cozy couch, and I'd wrap myself in a blanket and kind of, and it was almost like camping out. It was just kind of warm and comfortable and easy and safe. But as time went on, I realized something about sleeping in my actual bed um, felt really vulnerable. That I just, this just kept going. I kept sleeping on the couch long after I got better from COVID, and slept on my couch at least till early June. I was doing that pretty much every night, and I realized that I thought about going back to my bed, and there started to emerge these feelings of vulnerability in doing that, and unsafeness. It didn't feel safe to go back to my bed. And on the couch, I could cover up the silence with the television. And on the couch and in my bed, there was nothing to cover up all the challenging feelings and thoughts that I was having from all the struggles of work and life. And while the couch and the TV felt safer in some ways, it wasn't actually giving me what I needed to replenish myself. And the rest certainly helped me catch up on sleep, but I still felt drained, and there were definitely some pretty deep feelings that I was avoiding and dodging. So this past June, in recognizing that awareness, I began and with the space and all these feelings starting to emerge, I realized I needed to kind of take self-care a little more seriously, and I began a new set of self-care practices. And I tend to be a very on or off personality, so sometimes it's hard for me to moderate things and do things part way. So I'll often push myself very hard, and then not want to go through that again the next time with self-care and exercise in particular. So I wanted to create something that was more balanced with this self-care kind of plan, and something that I could do somewhat easily, which would help me be consistent, and to try and give myself permission to not be constantly pushing myself to do it better than I did the last time. And so each practice I chose felt valuable, but none of them felt too hard or too overwhelming to accomplish. I also created a checklist on Excel so I could tick off what I did each day, giving myself a little dopamine rush coming with each successfully checks box. I think some people probably recognize that experience. And at the same time, I've allowed myself the flexibility to know that I probably won't accomplish everything every single day, and some for now may be more aspirational than accomplished. I created 4 categories, which was that seemed to work for me: food, sleep, exercise, and peace. Food, sleep, exercise, and peace were the 4 kind of categories that I created for myself, and had little activities in each category. Under food, I had certain things that I know that help me diet wise. Those include not eating white flour and not eating sugar, and eating 3 to 5 servings of fruits and veggies each day. So those were kind of like some of my food ones. And under sleep, I had an 11 p.m. deadline for my bedtime. I tried to create a time where I would make sure that I was going to bed by then, because I'm often someone who will stray late into the night in terms of staying awake. So I set 11 p.m. as my bedtime, and 8 hours as a sleep goal each night. And under exercise, I had walking for 30 minutes 3 times per week, and one particular exercise that I like, which is called kettlebell swings, which doing those once a week, which is just an exercise that fit my body and works well for me, kind of basic toning. And for peace, I had 20 minutes of meditation each day and 20 minutes of book reading per day. I read a ton on my phone, but I really have stopped reading books, and I really wanted to kind of bring back books. And I also knew that meditation was really important for me, and a practice that I've engaged in on and off for about 30 years, and wanted to kind of uh, bring it more on than off. So, I've been doing that for about 2 months, and one of the beauties of that is I find that it's working, that I'm actually healing, and I feel better and healthier. And some of my earlier struggles are shifting and lifting. Some of the fears and challenges and things that I had back several months ago are kind of easing. And the walking and meditation in particular seem to help a lot. The physical activity really helps me regulate my mood a bit more, giving me some energy and an avenue for some of the physical stress to release itself. And the meditation helps me be present to some of the more difficult emotions I was feeling, and to process them and release them. And I started sleeping in my bed again. Now this is kind of where I want to shift a little bit, and I kind of, want to turn back to you. And again, I just want to acknowledge that this time has been rough, this past, year and change. And I don't know how any of us could not have been impacted in some way, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally by the last year and a half. And if I have a wish for you, it's that you allow yourself to have that simple acknowledgement that this time has been unusual and hard and different. And because of that, you may not be okay. You may be hurting in ways that you haven't even noticed or allowed yourself to notice. And you know what? That's normal. We've been through a collective trauma together. And so it's normal to be hurt by it, to have impact by it, and to be feeling and struggling with what's gone on. This has been hard. And I encourage you, just like that little storybook, to breathe into those feelings. It's okay. You will be okay. And if I have a second wish for you, if that's the first one, just to give you that simple acknowledgement and to allow you to give yourself permission to accept that you may not be okay. I have a second wish for you, which is it would be good to give yourself the care you really need. It may not even be that hard to do. It may not be as hard as you think. It may be an evening walk or 20 minutes on a cushion or a food choice that's a little less about stress relief and more about nourishing your body. You know what it is or what they are. You know what care you need. And maybe there might be some help in creating a little checklist to help you stay on track and giving yourself that little satisfaction that comes with checking off something on your list. And lastly, I invite each of you to stretch a bit outside yourselves, outside of ourselves, into the awareness that how you are feeling may be how others are feeling. That the care you need to give yourself may be the care that those around you need too. Even some of those angry folks that show up at school board meetings and other places, which I'm hearing about, have been heard about before the meeting. And in so many other contexts, in the grocery store or wherever, at work or wherever we encounter folks in our lives, in our own families, right? That the care you need to give yourself, again, may be something that those around you need too. And that healing doesn't have to happen alone or in isolation, that it doesn't happen alone or in isolation, and that you are not alone. And that now is a time where we just might need to love each other just a little bit more. For all these things, we are grateful. And for all these opportunities, may we rise. Bright morning stars arising. Bright morning stars arising. Bright morning stars are rising. Day is a breaking in my soul. Shalom, amen, and blessed be.